Today's file begins with a sign nailed to a piece of wood. You've seen this sign 100 times. Maybe you own one. 4 words and somehow everyone instantly understands exactly what they mean. This ground belongs to someone. Stay out. Here's the short answer. For most of human history, that sign would have meant nothing to anyone who read it. Not because people couldn't read. The long answer is stranger. Because the idea behind it, that a piece of the actual earth could belong to one person and not another, hadn't been invented yet. Ancient humans didn't argue about this the way you'd expect. They didn't have the concept to argue about at all. Interesting. Ancient humans didn't lack land. They lacked the concept of owning it. For tens of thousands of years, humans moved. Hunted here this season, gathered there the next. The land didn't belong to anyone, it simply was, the way weather was, the way rivers were. If your group used a valley this year and another group used it the next, that wasn't theft. There was nothing to steal. Nobody had claimed it in the first place. You can't steal what no one owns. Ancient humans didn't need permission to stand somewhere. That idea, needing permission to exist on a piece of ground, simply didn't exist yet. Then, someone stayed. And staying changed the question forever. When humans began farming, something happened that had never happened before. You didn't just use a piece of land for a season. You planted something in it. You waited months for it to grow. You depended on that exact patch of ground still being yours when the harvest came. For the first time, land wasn't just somewhere you stood, it was something you'd invested in. And the moment something is worth defending, someone draws a line around it. This story doesn't stay with ancient humans for long, because they weren't the ones who finished what they started. They lit the fuse. They didn't see it explode. That wasn't the first mistake, but it was the first fence. Archaeologists studying early farming settlements find something that never existed in the world before agriculture. Markers, stones, ditches, boundary lines cut into the earth, dividing land into pieces that belonged to specific people. Once that line existed, a whole new set of questions existed with it. Whose side of the line is this crop on? What happens if someone crosses it? What happens when the person who planted it dies? Who does the land belong to next? None of those questions existed before the line. All of them existed the moment after it was drawn. A line in the dirt disappears in the rain. So someone invented something that wouldn't. Some of the oldest written documents ever discovered aren't poems or prayers or stories. They're property records, clay tablets listing who owned which plot of land, how large it was, and what had been paid for it. Writing itself, one of the most important inventions in human history, was used for this almost immediately. Not to tell stories, to settle arguments about dirt. Once land could be written down, it could be bought, sold, passed on, taken away by force and justified on paper. The line in the dirt became a line in a ledger, permanent, official, and enforceable by someone other than whoever was strongest that day. For thousands of years after that, land records stayed scattered, local, incomplete. Then, one king decided he wanted to know who owned every single piece of his country, all of it, at once. In the winter of 1085, William the Conqueror, ruler of a country he'd taken by force less than 20 years earlier, ordered something unprecedented: a complete survey of England. Every manor, every field, every mill, every plow, every person working the land. Royal commissioners rode out to every corner of the kingdom. By the time they finished, the survey covered more than 13,000 separate settlements. Interesting. For each one, the record listed exactly who had held the land before the Norman conquest, who held it now, and precisely what it was worth. And here's the detail that made it more than a tax list. If your land was written into that book, the matter was closed, permanently. People began calling it, half in dread, the Doomsday Book. Not because it predicted the end of the world, because like Judgment Day itself, once your name was entered, there was no arguing with the verdict. For centuries after that, the system held. Then, in one Philadelphia courtroom, it didn't. By the 1800s, buying land meant hiring someone called a conveyancer, a specialist who would search every existing record and certify in writing that a property's ownership was clean. In 1868, a man named Watson did exactly that. He hired a conveyancer, paid for a full search, and received written assurance the title was clear. He bought the property in good faith. A hidden lien surfaced anyway, a debt attached to the land that the search had missed. Watson lost the case and lost his money. The court ruled the conveyancer hadn't been negligent. He had simply done his best, and his best wasn't good enough. Interesting. The record wasn't a lie, it was just incomplete, and incomplete was enough to ruin him. For the first time, buyers had to face an uncomfortable truth. No matter how thorough the paperwork, no matter how many centuries the system had been refined, the record itself could quietly be wrong, and the person who trusted it would pay the price alone. Pennsylvania's lawmakers took notice. In 1874, they passed a law allowing something that had never existed before, a company that would insure a piece of land's history, not the land itself. 2 years later, a Philadelphia conveyancer named Joshua Morris formed the Real Estate Title Insurance Company, the first business in the world built entirely around a single promise. If the record turns out to be wrong after all, we will still make you whole. The idea spread fast. Within years, similar companies opened in New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, each city deciding independently that the old promise, a clean paper trail, wasn't a strong enough guarantee anymore. By 1907, the industry was large enough to form its own national association, standardizing what insured actually meant from one state to the next. Notice something. Nobody planned this. Each city solved the same problem separately, the same way Vienna and Japan once solved the same problem with names, without ever comparing notes. Whenever a system built to protect people quietly develops a gap, someone, somewhere, eventually builds the next layer to cover it. Not because a government planned the whole structure in advance, because the last layer, eventually, wasn't quite enough. Not a record of ownership anymore, a guarantee about the record itself. From a stick in the dirt, to a clay tablet, to a king's unappealable survey, to a policy ensuring against the survey being wrong all along, every single layer exists because the layer before it, eventually, wasn't quite enough. Ancient humans solved a problem they never knew they'd created. You're still living inside their solution, and every patch they added to fix it. Somewhere in a county records office, on a shelf, or in a database, there's a deed with your name on it, or your landlord's, or a bank's. If a fire destroyed your house tomorrow, that piece of paper, and quite possibly a title insurance policy behind it, is what would prove the ground it stood on is still yours. That record is a direct descendant of a clay tablet from thousands of years ago, a king's survey from nearly 1,000 years ago, and a Philadelphia courtroom from 150 years ago, tracing an unbroken line back to the exact moment ancient humans decided a boundary meant something a stick in the dirt alone never could. The line never stopped being drawn, it just kept getting patched. Today's file opened with a question ancient humans never had to ask. Now you know why you can answer it instantly, and why it took thousands of years, and at least one very expensive lawsuit to make that answer reliable at all. If this file was worth your time, the like button tells the archive to keep opening more of them. File closed. For now.